everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Skills, baby. I am your host, Kelly Ryan Bailey. This week, I'm joined by Leonor from Montessori Group. Let me go ahead and quickly introduce her. So Leonor spent the entire part of her professional life in the private sector. However, she has been involved with charities since the age of 18 when she co-founded the Amnesty International Working Group for Children. During the Balkans War, she worked with children and women who were victims of the war. Upon coming back to London, Leonor started working with UK charity Fields in Trust. Her next role was for human rights charity Index on Censorship, before becoming the first executive director of the Galapagos Conservation Trust. Her next CEO role was at Medical Institute Raft. During her time there, Leonor created a life sciences company and was its CEO for 5 years, whilst concurrently serving as CEO of Raft. Under her leadership, both organizations won several international awards. In June 2018, Leonor took her fourth CEO role at Montessori Group, and she has personally won several awards for her leadership. Leonor, this is such a fantastic accomplishment. I hope you don't mind that I gushed on you there for a moment. Thank you for taking it so gracefully.
I was even impressed listening to it.
Well, we got to hear a little bit about the highlights, and what I would love to do is just to hear maybe a little bit more detail about what led you to Montessori Group where you are today.
Well, everything I've been involved with, I mean, if you go back to when I was 18 and helped set up the Amnesty Working Group for Children, has very much had a child focus to it. And so in a way it was inevitable. I was going to end up doing something like Montessori. And everything I've done has had a sort of very strong component of supporting children. So there's that bit. The second bit is, for me, I'm passionate about the opportunity that education gives to children. I am living proof of that. You know, I'm the first woman in my family to have a career, and that's because I am the first woman in my family to have had the opportunity to have been supported and encouraged to have a good education. And finally, I think that what Montessori does, it creates such a big impact in terms of, you know, allowing children to truly become the adults that they could become, to fulfill their potential. That has to be something that we must support, we must do for our children.
That's wonderful. So tell me a little bit more about when you started this journey, because what led you? I mean, it sounds like maybe it was your personal experience that led you to become so passionate about helping children.
I think that, well, yes, definitely my personal experience because of my family background. My family were originally refugees from Spain to the UK. And I also grew up, and I was the only one that could actually go back to Spain during that time. And I went as a child. And I saw my cousins didn't have the opportunities that, particularly my female cousins, didn't have the opportunities that I had. And I just sort of grew up with a sense of I feel so privileged to have had that opportunity. That I've always felt it's important that I give back and give others the opportunities that I was lucky because of the choices that my parents made, that allowed me to do that. So this, it's always been there, that sort of sense of I was very, very lucky, and I've had the life I've had because of the opportunities that were given to me, and it feels unfair somehow that if I can open doors, you know, for others, that I don't do that. So
yeah. And out of curiosity, I'm wondering now, based upon you being at Montessori school, did you happen to have a Montessori education when you were a child?
Well, do you know, I think I probably did without realizing, because I went to a state school in the UK, but I think my teacher was Montessori trained, because a lot of the things that I now know of as Montessori, we did in the classroom. And it was very familiar. The first time I walked into a Montessori classroom and sort of learned about Montessori, I thought, wow, that seems so familiar. I remember doing that. I remember that. So I think I probably did without realizing. Um, and I think, and obviously, the fact that I still remember that teacher sort of
Yes.
years later shows what a big impact she had on me.
Wow. Wow. You know, and now that I'm thinking about your work with Montessori, I'm also curious, did you have an interest in working with Montessori Group, or did they come looking for you?
Well, it was very strange actually, because I was looking for I'd been at my previous role for 11 years. I'd said I'd stay for 10, and then we had a change of chair, so I said I'd stay for another year to embed the new chair in. And and I was sort of looking for another job, and there were actually two jobs on offer. There was Montessori, and then there was another job. And the other job was closer to home, and it was actually more money. And you think logically that's the one I'd go for. And it was really strange because they rang me up and they said, well, what, Montessori want to offer you the job. And immediately I said, yes, I'll take it. And like all the books say, you don't do that. You say, oh, yes, thank you. Let me
Right.
think about it and then call you back, And I'd never done that before. And I put the phone down and I said to my husband, I don't know why, but I just knew I had to do that job. I knew that was it. And I just said yes straight away. So
That is so fascinating. When you have that feeling, I mean, it's hard to let that go. And I wonder too, so throughout that process, because now, understanding that this passion that you have around helping children, when you were evaluating this opportunity, is that when you first went into one of the classrooms? Like what was
yeah.
so different about what you must have experienced that made you just say yes?
I think yes, it was definitely, I went to visit a nursery, and I thought, wow, these children there's just a completely different vibe to it. They're so engrossed in what they're doing. They were very happy. They were quiet, not silent, but quiet and calm and really engrossed in what they were doing. And I thought, wow, that's a really, sort of interesting vibe here.
Mhm.
And I remember it was a child came in and they were trying to take their coat off and hang it on a peg. And, kind of my normal instinct was to step in
Yeah.
and the teacher said to me, no, they've got to do it by themselves. And this child could not reach the peg. And I was watching this child, and the child went off, a little toddler, sort of 4 years old, went off, obviously had processed this, went off, got like a little stool, came, put the stool in front, stepped on the stool and put the coat on, went, cut off the stool, carried the stool back. And I thought, wow, here is a child, and that's when it struck me the power of Montessori. Here is a child who at that age has discovered how to problem solve.
Mhm.
That's the skill we would call it as an adult. That child
Exactly.
was problem solving. Had a problem, had to think about how to solve it, solved the problem, and was creative in how they did it. And I thought, because no one told that little boy how to do it,
Right.
he went off and discovered it for himself. And I thought, this is really powerful stuff. This is really powerful stuff. So
So
that was kind of
powerful.
my, the thing that sort of hooked me in, I think.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about skills too is that it's not as if, they're sort of like habits, right? Because you can't just learn something one time. You have to be
Exactly.
presented with an experience that allows you to sort of like, and in the last podcast that I did, we were talking about skills as sort of muscles. So to sort
Mm,
of like be able to
yeah,
use that particular muscle, if we don't allow, in this case, right, a child to be able to figure it out on their own, then they'll never, what would be the point in their life when they actually start to, utilize or discover that they have this skill, this power.
exactly. And this is what I think is so fascinating and so powerful about Montessori. We're teaching children at such an early age, and as you say, this becomes ingrained. It becomes muscle memory.
Exactly.
We don't, it then becomes, it's a bit like, as an adult, when you learn how to drive a car, when you get into a car, once you've learned and you've driven several times you get to the stage where you're not really thinking about it.
Right.
You're just doing it because you remember how to do it. You have that skill now.
Right.
And the fact that we're teaching these young children to have those essential life skills. I mean, I refuse to call them the kind of soft skills, because they're not soft skills.
Right.
They're essential
Exactly.
life skills. At that age, we're already giving them an opportunity and a foundation on which to grow and blossom. And I think that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, and it sounds like you've seen children at all various ages experiencing trauma or challenges or crisis in their life. And it
Yeah.
sounds like to me, and just what you're describing, if you have started to experience in the, a light way, something like trying to figure out how to hang a coat, right? But if you learned that things in life aren't always going to be
No, easy.
just
No.
said and done easy, then it's not so daunting and overwhelming when something comes along, because it's just pause and let it settle in your mind, and then move forward. It's so I love the concept of Montessori, and it's just such a powerful, especially when you're saying it in this way, and
Yeah.
sort of experiencing through your story, your eyes, how this might have been when you made this decision. So tell me now, like you've been with Montessori, is it 3 years?
Coming up to 3 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
So did you have something in mind about, some change that you wanted to make with
Yeah.
Montessori, or was it more?
Yeah. For me, it was, I mean, there were a couple of things that I felt, you know, that I could add value, or I felt that I could do something different.
Mhm.
And so the first is, I felt that we have to be, we have to slightly demystify Montessori for most people, because,
Yes.
you know, people have some strange and weird and wonderful ideas about what Montessori is,
Well, I've heard it too. Like, how is that classroom going to stay orderly if the kids can
Yeah.
just do whatever they want?
So there's an element of sort of demystifying it, and I think that what a lot of people don't realize is this is a pedagogy that's actually grounded in science. You know, Maria Montessori was a doctor. She was the first woman to become a doctor in Italy.
Wow.
She created this pedagogy out of observing children and learning, and so she sort of took those scientific principles to create this. This is grounded in reality. This is not some weird and wonderful thing that was dreamed up at some point. This was built up, and it evolved as she learned more, and
Mhm.
she grew in experience. So for me, I thought there's something we have to do about kind of grounding Montessori in that reality of life. So last year in October, we launched a That's Montessori campaign online, where we talked to both parents and children at Montessori schools and
Mhm.
just talked about what are the sorts of things you do. And what was really fascinating, and we did some sort of surveys afterwards in the UK, was that, a lot of parents who knew nothing about Montessori or had some strange ideas about Montessori, we'd say to them, well, okay, so do you allow your children to, put their own shoes on? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that's what we do in Montessori. And you start to sort of bring it down to things that parents were probably already doing.
Right.
And in one of our surveys, I think we worked out that something like about, I think it was 87% of parents actually said, well, we've been doing Montessori in the home, but we didn't realize it,
Mhm.
because it just seemed logical and sensible, or they read about something, they didn't quite know it was Montessori, but thought, oh yeah, that's a sensible thing to do with my child. I can see how that's going to help my child, and we're doing it. And so I think that was a big part of saying, let's kind of demystify it. Let's bring it back to say,
Yeah.
this is grounded in something very sensible. So I think that was one bit which it's still an ongoing campaign for us, but that was something I wanted
Mhm.
to do, that I was very strong, sort of passionate about. The second thing I think is, you go back to where Maria Montessori started, and Maria Montessori's first school was in the slums of Rome. And when we talk about slums, you think about, 19th century, sort of early 20th century. I mean,
Mhm.
there was no welfare state. There was huge poverty.
Yeah.
One of the first Montessori nurseries in the UK was actually set up by the suffragettes in the East End of London, which is a very poor part of London, for vulnerable children. So I felt that we need to also kind of go back to that a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
say, what can we do for vulnerable children? Where can we, how can we focus our social impact work to support those families?
Yes.
And we know that Montessori is the Montessori approach, the Montessori method of education is really good at reducing the achievement gap between rich and poor children.
Mm-hmm.
You know this. There's actually been longitudinal studies in the US that have shown this, where you
Mm-hmm.
have children from, deprived socioeconomic backgrounds who have gone through Montessori, and by the time they get to high school, are performing as well as children from wealthy backgrounds.
Wow.
And that's really important for society.
Mm-hmm.
That's a marker of how important education is. And after all, don't we want adults to be productive and have good, healthy lives? I mean, doesn't that
Yes.
just enrich society when we do that? So I think there was that kind of, what can we do to sort of support that work is really
Mm-hmm.
for me. So those were the two things where I thought, I really want to focus on those two areas, and also just kind of get the message out there, just keep talking about Montessori, about it is the pedagogy of the future. I mean,
Exactly.
I know it was sort of developed 100 years ago, but yet here we are, and if you think about it, the parallels in history are really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Maria Montessori was, developing this at the time of the Industrial Revolution, a time of great socioeconomic upheaval, turmoil, change, political change. And she created something that was going to be impactful and
Yeah.
support children. Here we are at a time of huge change,
Yes.
not just with the pandemic, but also, because what the pandemic has done is basically accelerated what was already in existence. With
Exactly.
the fourth digital revolution coming along, you know, the world of work is changing. And everywhere I go around the world, people say to me, we need an education system that, teaches these skills of collaboration, critical thinking. And I'm going, you've got
We
one.
have that.
We're here. And that was, that sort of, can really is fascinating for me, that here we are with a method of education that speaks today to what is relevant to our lives today. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another sort of myth that exists around Montessori. I've had people say, oh, yes, but it's an old fashioned. No, it's not. This is actually what we need now. This is what we need now.
It's so
And
true.
so,
What kind have well, I have a few questions, but we'll
yeah.
come back to the COVID one. But
Mm.
going back to sort of your two pieces that you knew you could bring a lot of value to. The second one, which was sort of understanding from students and parents, and I'm curious if you've followed through to understand. You mentioned when people get to high school, right? But like
Mhm.
followed through into adulthood, because I'm so curious
Well,
how. Yeah.
sorry,
Nope, go ahead.
there is a piece of work which I know has been done. It hasn't yet been published, but the person who was actually in the States, who did the research, presented it at our conference 2 years ago, where they looked at adults at different ages, from
Mhm.
60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, and looked at, what were their lives like in terms of their mental well-being, in terms of their physical well-being, and then looked at what early years education did they have.
Mhm.
They looked at and they compared, adults who'd been through sort of mainstream or traditional early years education, those that had been through Waldorf Steiner, and those that had been through Montessori. And those that had been through Waldorf Steiner and Montessori had much better mental health and physical health. I mean, by a massive margin.
Yeah.
And those that had been to Montessori actually were the ones that had the best. So this is work that I know will be published soon. And so that shows that it has an impact, not just on kind of economic outcomes, but
Mhm.
actually physical and mental well-being into. And as I said, they looked at adults in their 60s.
Yeah. And I wonder, I'm waiting for someone to also do some research around how this changes someone to be sort of like, I say skills, but ready for work, because I think there is, again, this huge, like you said, people have the wrong opinion of this type of education. And the thing is that, like you described, and I think like we've learned in this COVID time period, that these skills, the problem solving, creativity, the list can go on, but the life skills are the ones that are hardest to find for employers. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so,
And they're in
from a
demand.
future of work perspective,
No, I mean they're in demand. I mean, Accenture did a big piece of work around this and said, and exactly they said these are the skills that are needed, and pretty much said, the education systems that we have around the world today don't deliver that.
Mhm.
So, this isn't just me saying it as Montessori. This is actually people out there taking a very hard business look at this and going, we
Of
are missing these
course.
skills. We have to have these skills in the future if we're going to be successful as organizations, as companies, as countries, as economies. So this is something that is being said over and over and over again. And I think that you're right. Those skills are, do translate into success.
Mhm.
A lot of the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are ex-Montessorians and credit Montessori for their
Amazing.
success.
Uh-huh.
You know,
There's a
there's a
reason.
reason. There's a reason. We are losing the traditional work base of you have a company, you go and work for a company, and you're there for 20 years or 30 years, and then you
Gone.
retire.
Yeah,
That's gone. That went even before the pandemic. That's
exactly.
You need people who can be entrepreneurial and innovative, even within a big organization. You
Mhm.
need people who can say, okay, how can we do things differently? You need people who have the confidence and the ability to do that sort of problem solving, to
Yeah.
say, okay, I know we've always done it this way, but what if we did it that way? What would happen?
Mhm.
And I think that and we need people who we need employers, we need bosses who are familiar with that ability to say, look, here's a
Exactly.
framework, and I'm giving you a freedom within that framework. I mean, that was one of the things that struck me when I went into Montessori and I learned more about Montessori. I sat there and I thought, wow, this is just modern leadership.
Exactly.
I mean, what are we talking about? Why? You know, I mean, I have an MBA, and I thought, wow, I am reading Marie Montessori, a woman 100 years ago, talking about things that all these amazing management gurus wrote lots of
Right.
textbooks about. You know, she was there. She was there. Apply that instead of children to how you manage an organization, how you manage people. These are leadership skills.
It's so true. And I've heard, and I'm curious your thoughts
Mm.
on this. I have heard a lot of people say, not that I'm discounting continuing education. I think that's
Okay.
fantastic, when it makes sense for you, right? Because some people can't
Mm.
afford that. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. I've heard, things about sort of, I don't have an MBA, and I have a bachelor's degree, but I've heard that traditional MBA programs tend to, lean back on traditional education. And I wonder if, because you've experienced, going through an MBA program, and it sounds like you had the unbeknownst to you Montessori education as a child, right?
Mm.
Do you feel like that maybe did that help excel you? Did that change your frame of mind?
I think it did because it made me, I've always questioned. I've always been, very I remember, you read all these sort of theories, and I kept going to. I remember in class going, yes, but why? Why is this? Why can't it be that? And they were like, no, this is the,
Right.
whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but why would it work in that environment? And there was a sort of, and I remember we did a one thing, and it was actually quite interesting because I had a colleague in my team who was Montessori, had gone through Montessori,
Mhm.
as it happened, coincidentally. I didn't, meant nothing to me at the time, but now
Right.
I remember that. And you're given a kind of a case study, and you're kind of
Uh-huh.
like there, and you're, and we were like, okay, and then here's a problem, and we came up with a solution, and we were like done in about an hour. We had the whole afternoon to do it, and our tutor came and said, well, but you haven't done all this, and we're like, but why do we need to do all this? Isn't that the solution? And he was like, yes, yes, it is, but you haven't done all this. And we were like, yeah, but why do we need to do all of that?
Yep.
When we kind of did something else. We sort of took a couple of shortcuts
Right.
and found the solution. And we had the solution. He couldn't argue with that. But it was actually it was quite a lesson to me. I was like thinking, yeah, why go through? I mean, all of these processes just because that's the way you do things.
Right.
When I set up, and I think I said this at a couple of times, I gave a talk. I set up this life science company
Uh-huh.
when I was CEO of the Medical Research Institute, RAF. I don't actually have a qualification in science. Okay. It was quite funny because all of my cousins I grew up with my cousins did. And I remember having so one of my cousins actually has a very sort of prestigious scientific job actually in a US government agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him laughing at me because I was talking to him about my job, and he just started laughing. And I said, David, why are you laughing? He said, do you realize you just used the word angiogenesis in the sentence and you actually understood what it meant? And I just went, oh. He said, we knew we'd get you in the end. We knew we'd get you in the end. Yeah, so it was like, having said, no, I'm not doing science. So anyway, but I set up this life science company, and it was really interesting because, the way we set it up, the way we went out and raised quite a lot of money for it through social investment, the way that we decided that we were going to do the clinical trials and everything, well, we followed all the regulatory requirements. And people kept saying to me, yes, but that is not the traditional way of doing things. And I think at one of the talks I said, if I had, kind of a pound for every time someone had said to me, that is not the traditional way of saying things, I would not have had to have gone out and raised for investment, because I would have had enough investment, because everywhere they kept saying to me, but that's not the traditional way of doing things. And I was like, and, but isn't it, am I not doing what you want me to do? Am I not following the regulatory framework? Are we not achieving this? Yes, but it's not the traditional way, and that's always kind of been, for me, it's like, well, so what? It's not the traditional way. I'm not saying that tradition is wrong. Sometimes, you do go, okay, that's, you understand why something's done
Right.
in a way, and there are things that I do that you would consider to be quite traditional, but
Mm-hmm.
because I understand the logic behind it. But that doesn't mean to say that I don't stop and think, yeah, but is there another way of doing it? And often
Mm-hmm.
there may be, or sometimes there isn't, and that's fine. But that kind of, let's just think about it differently, is something that I think it just has come from my education, I think.
I think so too. And, it's funny. I hear that often. As a child, I would get in trouble a lot because I did not want to follow the rules. Which is really funny. And I think I did not have a Montessori education, or maybe that the family would have been more open to my alternative ways. But, now that you talk about this life sciences organization and knowing the correct terminology at some point, how did you learn that? Just through going out and doing it? Did you go do any education around it?
I did. Well, I just asked a lot of questions.
Yes.
So, we had scientists, we had laboratories, and the scientists would come in and do a presentation. And I would say to him, okay, here's the thing. You need to explain it to me. You need to explain it to me. I'm the dumb one in the room. You have to explain to me in words that I understand, and explain to me what that means. And actually what happened was that by learning how to explain things in a non-jargon way, meant that not only did I sort of learn, but then we were really successful in getting support, because it was, sort of from donors, because we were suddenly talking to people who go, oh, oh, right, I get what you're doing now. I
Yes.
absolutely get it. You sort of, you're saying to me, you've created something that could grow a second skin without the need for a skin graft. Oh yeah, I get that.
Yep.
Now, talk to me about angiogenesis, and
Right. And then
I have
we
no idea what
lose
you're talking about.
everybody.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of questions, and I always say there are no stupid questions.
So true.
There are no stupid questions. So what if you ask a question and someone goes, "Ah, don't you know the answer?" Well, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't ask the question, so I'm
Exactly.
asking the question.
Exactly. Well,
Um,
and I think there is a skill underlying before you're ready to be, curious, is that you really have to not be scared that you
yeah,
don't know all the answers. And quite frankly, I think we as a society, just especially through traditional education, we've been told that if we're not, winning or, we're not the smartest, like that competition that exists. We're so used to, oh man,
mhm.
I don't want anyone to know that I have this
Well,
weakness.
well, it's,
Wherein,
it's a weakness, exactly. It's curiosity is seen as a weakness, and
which
that's
is such a
ridiculous.
shame.
It is a shame because nobody know. I mean, I can tell you, I've been a CEO now for 20 years. If you are the smartest person in the room, you have the wrong team around you
Yes.
as a CEO.
Yes.
That's simple. If you are the person who thinks that they know all the answers or has all the answers, you do not have a good team, and your organization is not going to succeed,
It is
because
so true.
you need to have people around you who are experts in their area. Yeah, of course, I know how to read a cash flow and a profit and loss and a balance sheet and everything like that. But I'm not an accountant. I'm not
Mm-mm.
a finance person. I have a really excellent finance person who does that work, and who can explain to me, okay, this is, we've done all this and this is what this means. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. I understand that because I have a general, understanding of how this works. I get what you're saying to me. I understand that. But I'm not gonna do it
Right.
because I'm an expert. We have expert educationists. Why should I be, I shouldn't be the one that makes those decisions, because I've got people who are experts in the field who spent decades studying this stuff. I'll go and ask them, and that's
Right.
in every job. And I think that which that's a leadership skill that I
It
think
is.
a lot of I think we're seeing that a lot of people don't have, and I
Mhm.
think the pandemic has brought that out.
So true, right? Because and that was one of my questions actually, which
Mm,
was,
mm,
I was going to ask internally how things have changed at Montessori, but we'll hold that question for one moment. This idea, when we talk about this future of work, and like you said, and I've written on this like 1,000 times too, it's that it was all there. It's just that
mm,
this moment in time has made it smack in front of everyone's face. And it's sort of the
yeah,
first time that the whole world got it at the same time. you know and it's interesting because now you look at what's happening in organizations, and part of their new structures, their focus on education and upskilling and talent mobility and all of these words that we like to use. Their focus was really more based on technical business skills. But all of a sudden, we're starting to see all of these organizations focus on mental wellness. And to me, that mental wellness is truly those foundational life skills, which, like we're saying right now, are these leadership skills.
yeah. And also the ability to communicate, the
Hmm.
ability, so what's the change that we had within Montessori? We've all been working remotely for a year now, and so that requires a different type of communication skill.
True.
That requires, as leaders, not to assume that everybody knows everything.
Mhm.
And how do you communicate without over communicating, without um, sort of inundating people with information, with data.
Right.
um, how do you now, whether right or wrong, I've always taken the stance that I employ adults and I treat people like adults. And if there's a problem, I'm going to be honest about it, because you're an adult, and you should be able to understand that I'm telling you this because I respect you enough to tell you that there's a problem. or that things are going to be tough. There's no point in sugarcoating a pandemic. There's no point in pretending it's all well, it's all going to be wonderful. And I'm sort of really astounded sometimes that where I've seen, leadership across the world, whether political leadership or organizational leadership, sort of talk about, oh well, when things get back to normal, that ain't gonna happen. There will be, what we have all experienced globally is going to create such a shift.
Yep.
That we can't just go, it's not like, oh, it's a blip. It's, we're really going to have to ask some difficult questions, and we're going to have to face some difficult, times. I mean, just the fact that if you think about families who've gone through grief, families who have not been able to grieve because they've not been able to be,
with
at
their
a funeral or with
yep.
their I had one of my uncles die during COVID, not of COVID,
Same.
but he died, and he was in Spain, and they had the funeral, and this is the first family funeral I have not been to because I couldn't travel.
Yep.
That was, that had an impact on me, but it also had an impact on the rest of the family, because when normally we would have got together as a family,
Right.
we
You
couldn't
get to
together.
hug each other,
No,
cry
couldn't
together.
do that. I've had friends that have lost parents that have said, my mother died alone and I'm heartbroken. I don't know how to deal with the guilt of that wasn't their fault. I mean, those are things that we have to talk about, we have to be open about, we have to not like, oh well, yes, now it's all going to be fine,
Right.
because you can't. And in a way it's almost like when a country's been through a war,
right,
if you don't actually talk about it, if you don't tackle what that has felt like for people, then you create problems for yourselves way down the line. We know this from history. Conflicts rise because something wasn't really tackled or dealt with, or we didn't deal with it as adults, in the wider sense. So I think that, and that's where leadership comes in, and that's that skill that we as leaders are all having to learn, because this is all new to all of us. It's all new to all of us. How do you deal with that? I never thought in all the years that I've been a leader that I would have to deal with. Of course, you have sometimes employees that have family problems or losses or whatever. Of course you do. But they tend to be rare.
Right.
They tend to be rare, and it's not sort of all around you all the time. So these are skills that we've got to learn. We've got to do it, because we can't keep behaving in the same way we've behaved in the past.
No. And I think, this moment, and it's interesting, right? How everyone takes this moment in a different way. I think you and I might be on the same page here that, was what was normal all that great anyway?
No. It's great for some and not great for some.
Right. But there's always, go ahead.
You put a pause, because I'm going to go and put the other lights on, because I can
see of course,
it in the dark, if that's okay. I'll be back.
Take your time.
That's okay. Okay, so now I'm going to shift myself around so you can
there you go. Yep, that's good. Oh, and I love that fireplace.
Yeah.
But no, it's, these sort of leadership skills, it's so true. I mean, for you, through this time, because to me, everything you've already described, I was like, man, you've already had all of these amazing leadership skills at your fingertips. And it sounds like you still found a place where you needed to learn more through experiencing this. Was there something in particular that helped you pick up these important skills through this process, or was it just going through
it? And I tell you, the one thing that I have done a lot more of is, and I think this has been, the pandemic has done this, is people are more open to talking about their experiences.
Mhm.
And I think that's been really powerful, so I've spoken to a lot of peers and said, right, okay, so what are you going through? And what I found the really kind of I think very positive and very interesting change is people opening up about how vulnerable they felt.
Mhm.
And I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen, kind of tough alpha males say,
Right.
I'm actually struggling. I'm finding this really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great. I mean, I see that as a positive, not the
Me
struggling,
too.
but I see it as a positive that they feel that they can have that conversation, because suddenly
Mhm.
you're going, okay, now we've got somewhere to go. Now we can learn from each other. And I think also that kind of the working from home, because I think that
Mhm.
it's just a different mindset. You do feel different when you're at home. You don't. I think it's quite interesting. And again, I think because it's been almost a year, I've certainly seen this. You sort of started off, and everybody kind of tried to emulate work
Yes.
place and home place. So you suddenly had, lots of articles around, oh, you must wear a suit and all this, all that. Gradually, that's kind of slightly drifted. So people are sort of, I mean, I was at a meeting earlier on, and I was like, some pretty kind of high-powered bankers and open shirts and t-shirts and polo shirts, and you just
Yep.
think, yeah, that kind of suit and tie thing's gone. And that's quite nice, because we were having a much more relaxed, conversation.
True.
And also, I think, because what the other thing about working from home is, inevitably there's going to be interruptions in most time, at least
Of
one.
course.
Somebody's child, somebody's cat, somebody's dog, something's going to happen, and people are, a lot more relaxed about it.
Yes.
I was talking actually to an MP, and his kids came running in and out, and I was like thinking, what, this would never have happened a year ago.
No.
No, and everybody was completely cool with it, because it was like, yeah, of course, your kids are, they're
Of
at home,
course.
of course it's going to happen.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
It's kind of nice to have all these barriers broken down in a way because, to think back again, like you said, a year prior to this, and then I especially felt it as a working mother working from home for a long time. I tended to it was always a try to separate.
mm,
There were years that I wouldn't have gone on video because there was no way to get ready for being on video. And likely I was holding a baby while I was trying to work, but no one was allowed to know
yeah,
that
but
was happening. And it's kind of nice, not only for, anyone, I think, to be able to just kind of like shake that off, because for so long we've tried to keep these two things separate when it's just our life, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
work and what's happening in our family. And I think that's why we're seeing these important leadership skills really come to bear at this point in time too, is because it's all always been together. We
yeah.
just
Oh,
didn't
absolutely.
we just didn't see it, we didn't allow it.
And I think that was particularly true for women, that, this, oh, I somehow, have to kind of pretend I don't have, a life, or I don't have caring responsibilities, and somehow that because otherwise that's a sign of weakness. And it's like, actually it's a sign of strength that you can do
Right.
that. I mean, the amount of skills you need to be able to juggle, to work and have children, or just to be around, just to care for children. I mean, that's a massive amount of juggling going on all the time, non-stop. It doesn't
Exactly.
stop. It's not like when you go into an office and you finish at 5 o'clock and that's it. I'm going to go home, I'm going to sit down, have a glass of wine or whatever. Not if you've got kids running around. You're not.
Nope.
That ain't going to happen. So it's that sort of, um I think that kind of, in a way it's nice that we're seeing that more human side of everybody,
Hmm.
and it helps people be a little bit more understanding, I think. And people feel, okay, actually, do you know what, I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I'm in my home. I mean, things are going to happen. There's nothing to apologize about. I mean,
It is. So all of these skills that we're learning over this time frame that
Mm,
are sort of outside of the normal way that
mm,
our education system, Montessori or not, and our
mm,
work system like to talk about skills, right? Like we like to talk about, I have this degree, I have this particular work experience, and that's what these things mean. But you and I, we've just had a whole conversation about all these fantastic skills that have been
mm,
gained in a totally different way. How do
absolutely.
people now recognize that? Like for you, even as an employer, I know teachers need a specific type of degree, and I totally understand that. There are going to be plenty of jobs that do, but has this made you stop and think about how you look at potential employees or your current employees?
I, I, I'll be honest, I have always employed people on who they are as people rather than their skills. And I learned that a long time ago because you can get some people who on paper look amazing
Yep.
and are just awful employees
Mm-hmm.
because they're missing those key human skills.
Yep.
And you can get people, and I've employed people who, haven't got a qualification,
Mm-hmm.
barely finished school, and have been brilliant, brilliant,
How
because
do you
they
evaluate that?
well, I mean, to some extent, it's been trial and error. I'll be honest. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to lie about it. But I think it's that. I think it's quite liberating. Excuse me. When you think about employing people, if you don't, almost if you, I almost don't look at their CVs because I think to my and I don't know in other parts of the world, but certainly in the UK, there's this thing about people have to have a degree. I don't think so necessarily. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that, and I'm hoping that we can kind of get past that and get past that.
I
That
think so
because
too.
you know, I mean, yeah, we talked about the fact that I've got an MBA. I don't even remember if I put it down on my bio or if and I don't think I even put it in my
I
CV
don't think you did now that I think
because
about it.
it's like, and no one's ever asked me.
Right.
You get to a certain stage where it's about what you've achieved,
Yep.
and no one's ever asked me. I've never been to a job where, I mean, yes, of course, there are jobs where you need to have those technical qualifications, but I've never been to a job where someone said, "Okay, can you, forward me your certificate? I want to see your degree." And never. And I think that if we can move away from that, that would be a good thing because I think there are some fantastic people out there who can make such an impactful difference to people's lives, and we need to value that. And I think hopefully that's what this also COVID has done, is helped us. I mean, it's certainly in the UK there's been a sort of newfound um, appreciation for people that actually do what you would have called kind of low level jobs, but
Yeah.
actually what we're realizing is if we didn't have the delivery people, if we didn't have the person that works in the shop, if we didn't have the nurse, if we didn't have, those people who may not be paid the highest salaries, but actually they're the ones that keep, the plumbers, the electricians that keep things going.
Yep.
If we didn't have those people, where would we have been? Where would we have been? And so I think it's important that we don't get hung up on those qualifications, and I think that that's actually very Montessori. I mean, of course, because we're part of all the traditional mainstream education systems, we
Right.
follow all the curriculum, but we're not big fans of testing people and test results and stuff like that because yeah, I mean I didn't actually do my degree until I was in my late 20s
Mm-hmm.
because I was in the UK we did these A levels and you're supposed to get certain
Yep.
grades. I didn't get those grades. We had a difficult year in the family, and it hasn't stopped me
Exactly.
achieving what I want to achieve. Um, and I think that we can get very very hung up on that. I think, and it doesn't it really is about the person and what does that person bring. And I think that's a really important discussion to be had around motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
because that's you don't get a qualification to be a mother.
No,
or a
you think
they-
about it. Anyone who's not a mother, just so you know, they send you home with a baby. No one trains you or tells you what to do, by
you don't go
the
to
way.
college for 3
And
years
this is
and
not like, oh, work where, something happens, not a big deal. This is like a life.
and that and yes, of course we should be supporting, families. We do a lot of that with Montessori, with some of the stuff that we do, but it isn't again, it isn't about getting a degree in it or something.
Right.
But it's an important skill set.
Mhm.
Skill set.
It's so important.
Yeah.
I think what you've just shared in terms of the way that you've been talking about people and the way you've hired people and the way Montessori, I just think that is such an amazing lesson. And the people listening today, the one sort of question that I have before we
Mm.
wrap things up was that when you meet someone for the first time that you are thinking of bringing onto your team, what's the first question you ask them?
Wow, that's good. Let me think. I think the first question I ask them is I say to them, tell me about yourself. And if they start launching into, well, I have this degree and that degree and this, I think, if they start talking about themselves as a person, then you think, okay, I'm dealing with someone who's going to be able to interact with other people in my organization as a person. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. It's all about teams are all about building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Respecting the differences because not everybody's the same, but building relationships, being able to work with people you don't like. That's a really important skill.
So hard.
So hard, but often happens.
It does.
I remember sort of doing, I think when I was doing my MBA and they were talking about kind of Myers-Briggs and this is the perfect team. And I was like, I remember saying to them, when does that ever happen?
Never.
When does it ever happen that you can go, no, 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 I have one of those. Thank you very much. I want something. No, you inherit a team or you end up with people who just happen because, no one else applies for the job or something,
Mm-hmm.
life is messy. And you have to know how to deal with people, how to interact with people, have to build relationships with people, even people you don't like. You have to at least be able to respect them or show them respect. You have to be able to interact with your customers or with your stakeholders. You have to be able to do that, and that's all about relationships. It's all about being a rounded human being effectively.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about. So if you so for me, that's what I'm really looking for. Are you
Mm-hmm.
someone who is and none of us are perfect, of course, but are you someone who understands how to be a rounded human being?
Yep.
And if
I
you
hope
are,
that
I
there's a lot of hiring managers that are hearing this right now, for a lot of recruiters, because it is so funny, the questions. It's been a little while since I've been at an interview myself, but it's just really funny when you think back about the questions. I actually also interviewed someone the other day, so I'll second what you said. That's the same first question that I asked. And when they started to go into their qualifications, I said, no, I mean, just like, what are you passionate about? What do you like? Like, tell me about you as a person. And they were so thrown off. They didn't know how to answer that. It was sweet. But then once they realized, like, oh, okay, I have to shift out of what I've always been asked and always supposed to answer into this other mind frame, and just to see them shift and the look in their eyes,
Well, if you think about it, if you hire someone, it's you're hopefully hiring them for the long term. It's like entering into a long-term relationship with someone.
Right. It's almost like it's a little bit of
It's
a marriage, right?
exactly
You spend more
a little
time
bit.
with them than maybe your spouse.
Exactly. And what you're looking for is someone that you can kind of get on with and hope that they'll share the same passion and drive that you have, and hopefully some of the same values. And that's kind of what you're looking for. If you went to a date and somebody whipped out their certificates, you'd be going, okay, thank you very much. Oh, look, I've got a phone call to go to or something. I mean, seriously, you would, wouldn't you? You want to know about people. And I think and yeah, a little bit like dating, sometimes you get it wrong, and you go through and you go, okay, that lesson learned. But I think that kind of human element is really the thing about where we all have to be in the future, because, and we have, and this goes back to the digital revolution. We're going to have machines to do a lot of the
Yep.
mechanical stuff.
Yep.
It's the human stuff. Someone said to and it wasn't me, I have to say, but someone said to me that really resonated with me, and it was a conference about AI, and they said, in the future, with artificial intelligence, the work that lawyers do of absorbing all these case studies and stuff, a machine will be able to do it in seconds.
Oh,
Audits, machines will be able to do that.
yep.
Now, would you trust a machine to cut your hair? I thought, wow. I thought, it was a point well made. That human interaction, I probably wouldn't, trust a machine to cut my hair. I'd trust another human being to cut my hair, but I wouldn't necessarily, would you trust a machine to, look after your child? Probably not. You probably trust another human being. So it's kind of those human skills that are going to be the ones that coming back to this conversation about the future of work that are there, and I thought it was a really, that's really quite a profound thing to say in a sort of funny way, but quite a profound thing to say that,
It's actually a great way to put it, because it just makes people stop and think there for a moment.
Yeah, well, I said, I didn't say it, but it was, when he said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right.
So true. Well, I'd like to ask you one last question, because I love the idea of, wanting our, sort of inspiring our listeners to take action. What's the one thing that you would suggest people could do in their daily lives to grow right now?
Ask questions. Curiosity, learning is all about curiosity in a way, isn't it? We talk about continuous personal development and lifelong learning, but that's really about having curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Ask questions, find out why is this happening. And I think also as a society, that's important as well. But it's asking questions not in an accusatory way necessarily, but in a way of, I want to understand. I want to understand, what does it feel like for you to go through this thing? What does it feel like, to experience this? Why do you do that in that way? Why don't you do it in another way? How can we make things different? So those, just ask questions.
Such fabulous advice.
Thank
you so much, Leonor, for joining me today. This has just been, I think we could actually chat for a really long time.
I've loved talking to you. I think we probably could. Yes. Yeah.
I know. One day when we're allowed to travel again.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I highly suggest that you all learn more. If you are not familiar with Montessori, head over to montessori-group.com. Just some amazing information. I, in fact, have submitted my son, my youngest, my 6-year-old, into, because we were all virtual this year. My hope, fingers crossed, that we will be back to school next year, and he will hopefully be at our local Montessori school. So I am a big fan, but go and check them out. Really fabulous. I think even like you described earlier, for young people, but also for parents. And I would say just adults in general, the ideas around, this really is building leaders of the future. And that could be you as an adult. Maybe you just your eyes haven't been open to that yet. So check them out. And Leonor is available on LinkedIn and also on Instagram at Montessori_CEO. I want to go and check out your Instagram
account. LinkedIn, I'm going to tell you my LinkedIn. It's Leonor Stjepic, which is my name. And yes, and my Instagram, I'd love you to check out my Instagram. Be warned, it does also show pictures of my dogs. So, it's not all Montessori. So, and the occasional bottle of wine.
That's okay. You know what? This is the whole point of like you as a person. That's what I love about this. We just talked about all these human aspects, and it's like you sharing you.
It is me as a person. So it's not cool at all.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, I am just I'm myself inspired by our discussion today. So thank you. please, like, we're just so thankful for you doing this work and helping all of these children across the world. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Kelly. Take care.
Have a great day.